The galaxy had been at peace for 12,000 years. The conclave of species ruled over 17 intelligent races, each one ancient and wise, each one certain that they had mapped every corner of known space. Their ships traveled between the stars using gates built by engineers who had died before most planets had cooled. Their libraries held the collected knowledge of civilizations older than some solar systems. They believed they understood everything worth understanding. They were wrong. The survey vessel Whisper of Stars was performing a routine scan of an uncharted region when its sensors detected something strange. A rogue planet drifted through the empty void between galaxies, far from any sun, cold and dead and forgotten. Such objects were common enough to ignore, but this one held a secret buried 3 kilometers beneath its frozen crust. The structure was artificial. Captain of the species stared at the readings on her display screen. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep confusion among her kind. The structure was massive, built from alloys her computer could not identify, and it radiated a faint energy signature that should have been impossible after so many years without maintenance. She ordered her crew to send a message to the Conclave's archaeological authority. Then she waited. Ambassador arrived 3 months later aboard a diplomatic vessel carrying representatives from 7 different species. She was old by standards. Her scales faded to a pale silver, but her mind remained sharp. She had spent 200 years studying the remnants of dead civilizations, and she had never seen anything like this. The structure, she realized immediately, was not a building. It was a vault. The design made this clear to anyone who understood such things. The outer walls were thick beyond reason, layered with materials meant to withstand impacts that could crack a moon. The single entrance was sealed with mechanisms that seemed designed to resist any attempt at opening from outside. Everything about the construction said the same thing over and over again. Whatever was inside was meant to stay inside. The joint expedition set up a research base on the frozen surface. Scientists from 7 species worked together, sharing data and theories, arguing in the polite way that academics argue when careers are at stake. They drilled through ice that had not seen sunlight in millions of years. They analyzed the vault's outer shell with every tool they possessed. The isotopic dating came back first, and it changed everything. The vault was old, not merely ancient, but impossibly, incomprehensibly old. The readings suggested it had been built at least 40,000 years before the conclave itself existed. This placed its construction during a period the historical archives called the Silence, a dark age lasting millions of years when something had apparently scoured the galaxy clean of intelligent life. No one knew what had caused the silence. The elder races had risen afterward, finding only ruins and mysteries. They had built their civilization on the bones of whatever came before without ever understanding what they were standing on. Now they had found a piece of that lost era, perfectly preserved in the cold dark between stars. Ambassador made the decision to breach the vault. Some of her colleagues argued against this, warning that the builders had clearly wanted to keep something contained. But curiosity was stronger than caution, as it always was among species that had survived long enough to travel between stars. They had to know what was inside. It took them 3 years to open the outer seal. The engineers used cutting tools that could slice through starship hulls. They employed acids capable of dissolving diamond. They applied forces that would have collapsed mountains. The vault resisted everything with patient stubbornness, yielding only millimeters at a time, as if testing their determination. When the seal finally cracked, the air that rushed out was so old that it contained elements in ratios not seen since before the conclave formed. The scientists analyzed it with trembling hands, hardly believing what their instruments told them. This air had been breathed by beings who lived when their own ancestors were still swimming in primordial oceans. The expedition entered the vault with cameras recording every step. What they found inside made several of them sit down suddenly, their legs no longer willing to support them. Stasis pods. Thousands upon thousands of stasis pods, arranged in perfect geometric rows that stretched beyond the range of their lights. Each pod contained a single occupant, preserved in a sleep so deep it bordered on death. The technology was beyond anything the Conclave possessed, elegant and brutal at the same time, clearly designed to keep its contents alive for eternity if necessary. The beings in the pods were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They were small by most standards, averaging perhaps 2 meters in height. Their bodies were soft, covered in thin skin without scales or chitin or any obvious protection. Their faces bore 2 forward-facing eyes, a feature typically associated with predator species, though nothing else about their fragile forms suggested any capacity for violence. Ambassador ordered a full genetic analysis. The results came back negative. The DNA of these creatures matched nothing in the Conclave's registry. They were not related to any known species, not connected to any branch of the galactic family tree. They were something entirely new, or rather, something entirely old. They were remnants of the time before the silence, survivors of whatever catastrophe had erased intelligent life from the galaxy. The debate over what to do lasted for months. Some argued for leaving the vault sealed and departing immediately. Others wanted to study the pods without disturbing their occupants. A few suggested destroying the entire site, reasoning that whoever built this prison had done so for good reasons. In the end, Ambassador made another decision. She authorized the revival of a single specimen. The medical team selected a pod near the entrance, reasoning that those closest to the exit might have been placed there intentionally, perhaps for exactly this situation. They connected their equipment to the pod systems and began the slow process of bringing its occupant back to life. The being inside was female, according to their scans, though such distinctions were often meaningless across species. She appeared to be in the middle range of her species, healthy and whole, her brain activity suggesting an intelligence comparable to the Conclave's average. The revival process took 6 hours. The medical team watched their screens with growing tension as vital signs climbed toward normal levels, as organs began functioning again after eons of stillness. When the creature's eyes finally opened, everyone in the room stopped breathing. The eyes were brown, flecked with gold, and they held an awareness that was immediately unsettling. This was not the confusion of someone waking from a long sleep. This was the sharp focus of a mind that was already calculating, already adapting, already planning. The creature looked at the assembled representatives of 7 spacefaring civilizations, scientists and diplomats and soldiers, each one representing a species that had ruled the stars for, each one staring at her with a mixture of fear and fascination. She smiled. It was a small expression, just a slight curve of her lips, but something about it made Ambassador take a step backward without meaning to. The smile contained too many things at once: amusement, recognition, something that might have been satisfaction. Then the creature spoke. Her voice was soft but clear, and the words she used were perfect Conclave standard, the common language of all 17 species. This should have been impossible. She had been asleep for 40,000 years, frozen in a vault beyond the reach of any transmission. She could not possibly have learned their language. Yet she spoke it without hesitation, without accent, as if she had been practicing for exactly this moment. "You have no idea what you've just done," she said. Ambassador found her voice with difficulty. "Who are you? What are you?" The creature sat up slowly, examining her own hands as if seeing them for the first time in a very long while. She flexed her fingers, rolled her shoulders, turned her head from side to side. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, like a predator testing its body after a long rest. "My name is," she said, "and I am what your ancestors forgot. I am what your histories erased. I am the reason intelligent life disappeared from this galaxy for millions of years." She swung her legs over the side of the pod and stood. Several guards raised their weapons, but she paid them no attention. She was looking at the rows of pods stretching into the darkness, at the thousands of her kind still sleeping, waiting. "I am human," she said, "and you just woke us up." The word meant nothing to them. Human. It was not in any database, not referenced in any archive. It was a ghost from a past so distant that even ghosts had forgotten it. But the way she said it made ambassadors' hearts beat faster. The word carried weight, carried history, carried something that felt like a warning. This creature, this human, spoke like someone delivering news that would change everything. And in the depths of the vault, barely visible in the shadows, the lights on other stasis pods began to blink. The first 72 hours after woke were the most carefully documented in Conclave history. Every species involved in the expedition had their own recorders running, their own analysts watching, their own experts trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. None of them succeeded. The human adapted faster than anything they had ever seen. Within the first hour, she had learned the basic layout of the research base. She asked questions that seemed innocent but later revealed themselves as tests, probing for information about power systems, communication arrays, security protocols. She noticed which guards were alert and which were tired. She identified the scientists who were afraid of her and the ones who were merely curious. By the 6th hour, she had figured out how to operate the door controls in her containment cell. She did not try to escape. She simply wanted them to know that she could. The scientists ran every test they could devise. Physical examinations revealed a body that was far more resilient than it appeared. Her bones were light but strong, her muscles capable of sustained effort that would exhaust most species. Her cardiovascular system seemed designed for endurance, her lungs able to extract oxygen from air with remarkable efficiency. She healed from minor injuries at a rate that made the medical team exchange worried glances. But the truly disturbing discoveries were mental. Learned Conclave standard by listening to her captors speak. She had no translation device, no database access, no educational materials. She simply listened, asked occasional questions, and within 3 days was speaking the language better than some native users. When they tested her with other languages, she absorbed them at the same impossible rate. Her memory was close to perfect. She could recall conversations from days earlier word for word. She noticed patterns in guard rotations that the guards themselves had not recognized. She predicted meal times before anyone told her, simply by observing the behavior of the staff. And she refused to answer any questions about her species. Ambassador tried every diplomatic approach she knew. She offered friendship, partnership, formal alliance. She promised resources, territory, seats on the Conclave Council. She hinted at threats and suggested the consequences of non-cooperation, listened politely to all of it and responded with nothing useful. "You want to know why we were sealed away," said during one of their conversations. "You want to know what we did, what we are, what danger we might represent. These are reasonable questions." "Then answer them," replied. Shook her head. "You would not believe me, and even if you did, you would try to put us back. So let us skip that part and move on to what happens next." "Which is?" The human smiled that unsettling smile again. "That depends entirely on what kind of civilization you have built." The Conclave's intelligence services began compiling reports. They analyzed every scrap of data from the vault, every word spoke, every gesture she made. They consulted experts in psychology, biology, history, and warfare. They built models and ran simulations and argued about threat assessments. The conclusions were not reassuring. Humans, they determined, were persistent predators. Their evolutionary history had shaped them to pursue prey over long distances, outlasting rather than outfighting their targets. This explained their cardiovascular endurance and their apparent patience. It also suggested a psychology built around delayed gratification, around the ability to wait and plan and adapt until an opportunity presented itself. Their forward-facing eyes confirmed predator ancestry. Their social structures appeared to be based on complex group dynamics, with strong emotional bonds forming between individuals who shared experiences. This pack bonding instinct extended beyond their own species, apparently applying to animals, machines, and even abstract concepts. Most troubling was their capacity for violence. Had not displayed any aggressive behavior, but the analysts had found traces of weapons in the vault. Not advanced energy weapons or sophisticated targeting systems, but simple kinetic devices designed to throw metal at high velocities. Chemical explosives, bladed tools meant for close combat. The designs were primitive by conclave standards, but the variety and quantity suggested a species very familiar with causing harm. They are dangerous, one report concluded, not because they are strong, but because they are adaptable. They will learn our weaknesses faster than we learn theirs. They will form bonds with individuals in our populations and use those bonds to gain influence. They will fill gaps in our societies that we do not realize exist until they are already filled. The report recommended immediate containment of all vault sites, with military forces standing by to destroy them if necessary. But it was already too late. The vault the expedition discovered had not been designed merely to contain. It had been designed to signal. When the outer seal cracked, something woke up in the ancient machinery. A transmission had gone out across the galaxy, using methods the Conclave did not understand, reaching places they had dismissed as empty and dead. Other vaults began to open. Reports came in from every sector of known space. Survey teams found human installations in asteroid belts. Mining colonies discovered caches beneath worlds thought to be barren. One vault activated beneath the capital city of the, rising from underground caverns that had been sealed for so long everyone had forgotten they existed. The humans inside these vaults did not wait for formal revival protocols. They woke on their own schedules, opened their doors, and stepped out into a galaxy that had forgotten them. Ambassador demanded explanations from, "What is happening? How many of you are there?" Stood by the window of her quarters, watching the lights of the research base reflect off the frozen surface outside. Her expression was calm, patient, utterly unconcerned. "Enough," she said. "There are enough of us." Within one standard year, 47 billion humans walked free across conclave space. They did not attack. They did not conquer. They did not demand territory or resources or political power. They simply appeared, offered their services, and began integrating into galactic society as if they had always belonged there. They filled labor shortages in industries that other species found too dangerous or tedious. They volunteered for exploration missions to hostile environments, for construction projects in deadly conditions, for research that required long hours of repetitive work. They learned every skill that was offered to them and invented new ones when necessary. They formed friendships with everyone they met. They adopted pets from alien ecosystems. They decorated their living spaces with art from cultures not their own. They celebrated holidays that made no sense to anyone else and invited their neighbors to participate anyway. And they watched, they learned, they adapted. The Conclave's intelligence services tracked their movements with growing alarm. Humans were everywhere now, woven into the fabric of galactic civilization like threads in a tapestry. They held no official positions of power, refused all seats on governing councils, declined every offer of formal authority. But somehow, nothing important happened without their involvement. Trade routes adjusted to accommodate human logistics networks. Scientific research accelerated in laboratories where humans worked. Conflicts between species decreased in regions where humans had settled, old grudges fading under the pressure of their relentless friendliness. They are adapting, one analyst warned the conclave leadership. But not to us. They are adapting us to them. They are making themselves necessary, making it impossible to imagine functioning without them. And by the time we realize what they have done, it will be too late to undo it. The conclave debated, argued, and ultimately did nothing. The humans were too useful to remove, too integrated to isolate, too friendly to oppose. Every attempt to limit their influence was met with cheerful cooperation that somehow left them more embedded than before. Ambassador visited one final time before returning to her. "You are conquering us," she said. "Without weapons, without threats, without anything we could defend against. You are conquering us with kindness." Looked at her with those strange predator eyes, soft and warm and absolutely unreadable. "Is that what you think we are doing? What else could it be?" The human was quiet for a long moment. Outside, human workers were helping repair a section of the base that had been damaged in a storm. They worked alongside engineers, laughing at jokes in languages they had learned just days before, sharing meals from supplies they had brought themselves. "Wait," said finally. "Just wait, and when you understand what we really are, come find me again." Left with more questions than she had arrived with. And in every corner of the galaxy, the humans kept working, kept helping, kept weaving themselves deeper into the lives of 17 species who still did not know what they were dealing with. The silence had ended 40,000 years ago, but whatever had caused it was waking up now, wearing friendly faces and learning the names of everyone it met. Ambassador was dying when finally came to see her. 237 years had passed since the day the vault opened, had spent the last decades of her life watching the galaxy transform in ways she still did not fully understand. Now her body was failing, her scales fallen pale and thin, her 4 eyes clouded with age. She lay in a medical facility on her, surrounded by family members and the soft hum of machines that could prolong her life but not save it. Looked older, too. Her hair had turned gray, her face lined with the marks of time that humans wore so openly. But her eyes were the same as they had been in that first moment, sharp and aware, and filled with something that had spent 2 centuries trying to name. "You came," said. Her voice was weak, barely more than a whisper, but heard her clearly. "I promised I would," replied. She pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, moving with the careful slowness of age. "When you were ready to understand." Managed a thin smile. "I am not sure I will ever understand, but I have little time left for confusion." Outside the window, the city spread out in the evening light. It looked different than it had when was young. Human architecture blended with designs, creating something new and strange and beautiful. Human music drifted from somewhere nearby, mixed with traditional songs in a harmony that should have been impossible. The galaxy itself had changed. The 17 species of the conclave had not merely accepted the humans among them. They had grown together, learned from each other, built something larger than any of them could have built alone. Old conflicts had faded. Old barriers had fallen. The galaxy was more united than it had been in all of recorded history. And still no one knew why the humans had been sealed away in the first place. "You wanted to know," said, as if reading her thoughts. "All those years ago you asked what we were, what we had done, why we were locked in that vault. You said I would not believe you. You would not have, not then," leaned forward, her aged hands folded in her lap. "But now you have seen what we can do. Now you have watched us for 2 centuries. Now you might be ready for the truth." Gathered her strength. She had waited so long for this moment that she had sometimes wondered if it would ever come. "Tell me." Was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant, looking at something far beyond the walls of the room. 50,000 years ago," she began, "we were everything you feared we might be." The words hung in the air, felt her heart's beat faster despite their weakness. "We were conquerors," continued. "We spread across the galaxy like a fire spreading through dry grass. We found other species, other civilizations, and we consumed them. Not always through violence, though there was plenty of that. We consumed them through adaptation, through integration, through making ourselves so necessary that they could not survive without us. She paused and saw something in her eyes that she had never seen before. Shame, old and deep and never quite healed. We did not hate them, that was the worst part. We did not conquer out of anger or fear or even greed. We did it because we could not help ourselves. We were too hungry, too adaptable, too much. We saw a gap and we filled it. We saw a weakness and we exploited it. We saw a civilization and we became part of it until we were the only part that mattered. The silence whispered, "You caused the silence." Nodded slowly, not directly. We did not kill every species in the galaxy, but we broke them. We made them dependent on us, and then we needed more, always spreading, always consuming. Civilizations collapsed when we moved on to new targets. Wars erupted when we played sides against each other. The galaxy burned because we did not know how to stop. The words were terrible, but found herself believing them. She had watched the humans for 200 years. She had seen how they worked their way into everything, how they made themselves essential, how they formed bonds that were impossible to break. She had seen it, and she had not understood what she was seeing. Until now. So our ancestors made a choice, said. The ones who understood what we were doing, who saw the destruction we were causing, they gathered everyone they could convince and they built the vaults. They sealed themselves away, put themselves to sleep, and waited for the galaxy to heal. 40,000 years, said. You waited 40,000 years. We had to. The damage we caused was too great for anything less. The galaxy needed time to forget us, to rebuild, to grow strong again. His voice was heavy with the weight of all those years. Our ancestors left instructions. Do not wake until someone finds us. Do not wake unless they are ready for us. Ready for you. Met her eyes, ready to give us something to protect instead of destroy. Lay still, processing this. Her mind was slower than it had once been, but it still worked well enough to see the shape of what was telling her. The vaults, she said, they would have stayed closed if we had not been strong enough. Yes, the fail-safes were designed to keep us sleeping forever if the galaxy had not recovered. If whatever civilizations arose were too weak or too divided to survive contact with us, the vaults would never have opened at all. Smiled, and this time the expression was sad rather than unsettling. You found us because you were ready for us, because you had built something worth keeping. Thought about the conclave. 17 species united in peace, ruling a galaxy together for 12,000 years. It had seemed so stable, so permanent. But she could see now how fragile it had been, how many cracks ran through its foundations. Old rivalries, unresolved conflicts, the slow drift toward isolation that affected every long-lived civilization. And then the humans had arrived, and everything had changed. You are still doing it, she said. You are still making yourselves essential. You are still filling every gap, adapting to every need. Yes, admitted. That is what we are. That is what we will always be. We cannot change our nature any more than you can change yours. Then what is different now? Reached out and took's hand. Her grip was gentle, warm, careful with the fragility of age. It was such a human gesture, thought, such a simple thing, but it carried meaning that words could not express. The difference is purpose, said. 50,000 years ago we consumed because consumption was all we knew. We spread because spreading was our nature. We had no reason to stop, no goal beyond the next conquest, no future worth preserving. She squeezed his hand gently. Now we have something to build. Now we have something to protect. Now we have a reason to be what we are. And what is that? You, said simply, all of you. The conclave, the 17 species, the civilization you built while we were sleeping. You gave us something that our ancestors never had. You gave us something to care about. Felt tears forming in her clouded eyes. She had spent 2 centuries wondering if the humans were a threat, if they would eventually reveal their true intentions, if the kindness they showed was just a mask for something darker. She had never considered that the kindness itself might be the point. "We are not conquerors anymore," continued. "We are gardeners. We found a garden that someone else planted, and we are going to make sure it grows. We are going to fill every gap, strengthen every weakness, protect every fragile thing that needs protecting." Her voice was firm despite her age, filled with a conviction that had been building for 200 years. That is what humans are for now. That is what we chose to become. "And if we had not been worthy," asked, "if the conclave had been corrupt or cruel or broken?" Was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Then we would have fixed it anyway. We would have made it worthy. That is what we do, Ambassador. We see what things could be and we make them that way." Closed her eyes. She could feel her life fading now, her grip on consciousness loosening with each passing moment. But she was not afraid. For the first time in 2 centuries, she understood what she had been watching. For the first time, she saw the shape of the future that the humans were building. It was strange and frightening and completely beyond her control, but it was also beautiful. "Thank you," she whispered, "for telling me." Held her hand until the end. When hearts finally stopped, the human remained seated beside her bed, eyes closed, honoring the silence. Outside, the galaxy continued to turn. Human ships traveled between stars that had been dark for millions of years. Human voices filled spaces that had been empty since before the conclave existed. Human hands built and repaired and created, never stopping, never resting, never satisfied with anything less than perfection. They were not the same as they had been 50,000 years ago. They were something new, something that had never existed before. They were humanity reborn, humanity with purpose, humanity aimed at a goal larger than consumption. They were gardeners now, and they intended to tend this garden forever. The funeral for Ambassador was attended by representatives from all 17 species of the conclave. It was the largest such gathering in living memory, a testament to the respect that she had earned over 2 centuries of service. Leaders spoke about her wisdom, her patience, her tireless work for peace and understanding. But it was the human honor guard that drew the most attention. They stood in perfect formation around her memorial, soldiers from a species that had once burned the galaxy clean, now standing watch over the remains of someone who had given them a chance to be something else. They remained there until dawn, as was their custom. Then they folded their flags, performed their rituals, and returned to the work that never ended. In the centuries that followed, the galaxy changed beyond recognition. Humans and their adopted families pushed further into the unknown, found new wonders, faced new challenges. The conclave grew and evolved, becoming something that the original founders would not have recognized. Old boundaries disappeared. New connections formed. And through it all, the humans were there, helping, building, protecting, making themselves so essential that no one could imagine existing without them. They were not conquerors anymore. They were exactly what they claimed to be. They were the gardeners of the galaxy, and they had only just begun their work.